All right, so this week I wanted to talk about when your house is on the market, like the expectation in terms of like what we set for ourselves in regards to watching over those properties, especially when they're vacant, in order to make sure that like ultimately they're staying show ready throughout the listing process. So let's go ahead, let's get into it. Hey guys, it's Bill Stewart here with the Bill Stewart Homes Team at Remax Moves in Simpsonville, South Carolina. And I had a couple of things happen over the last couple of weeks that are a bit of concern to me, especially as when you're representing your seller and their property and properties that are vacant. You know, a lot of times like sellers sometimes have vacated the property, moved out of the area, maybe onto another home. They're not necessarily there every single day. And so at that point, kind of the checkpoints that we're looking at at a minimum on a weekly basis in order to ensure that that property is still secure, that the showing side, you know, from a showing perspective, that it looks the same as it did the week before, and that there's nothing that would, in essence, like create any sort of challenge for a buyer when they walk in, i.e., if there's a smell in the house, if there's a water leak, if there is something that's going on from a mechanical perspective that at that point could deter a buyer walking in. I think it's really important that we're constantly assessing that condition. And in my opinion, I feel like it's a responsibility for me. Like that's what I'm doing as a representative for my client, is to ensure that their property is being managed and taken care of. So had an issue where went out with a client, to look at homes. We had looked at a couple of, probably 5 or 6 different homes. And one of the homes that was on their list was a new construction home because of the fact that they really liked the floor plan. It had a great lot, all of these different things, and the pictures looked incredible. So we had gone out to look at the house. And as soon as I opened up the door, I could smell what smelled like moisture. And if you know that smell immediately when you walk in, where I was like, it wasn't overwhelming, but it was enough. And knowing that it was a basement home, I was like, at that point, like it could signify that there was some sort of like moisture issue or moisture problem. And so, we start touring the home. I'm not seeing anything in terms of like, challenge or issue. On the top floor, we're looking at the bedrooms. Everything looks really great. Everything's put together. But as we start walking down the stairs, what I notice is we can see standing water, and we can see where the trim level close to the, your trim, it was starting to kind of buckle out and starting to see some staining on the drywall, which at that point led us into a closet where we saw that the water heater itself had started to overflow. And it was leaking out through not only in the downstairs area, but they had their garage that was at the basement level, and it was starting to seep through the walls into the garage as well. So, obviously there was a considerable amount of damage, but it wasn't something like, it was evident like that it was not something that had just happened like the night before or even the day before, that this had been an ongoing issue with that property because of the fact of just the amount of damage that was already going in. And so at that point, like, we know it's a drywall at the very minimum. You don't know what the support structure is, behind that wall. How does that stuff look? The fact that it's seeping on the floor through into the garage. I mean, it was something that had occurred. It was going, at first it would have been a simple fix, but it was evident that there had been nobody at that property, at least within the last 10 days of where they were. And to me, I think that was it was pretty upsetting in that, at the end of it, I'm making a phone call. As we walked up, we noticed that there was also a window that was broken. It didn't look like anybody broke the window. It looked like if the windows get too hot, sometimes that air gap, if you've got insulated windows, you can see that the exterior window in that double pane, one of the panes starts to crack and break. But the idea that obviously, it was now starting to affect the efficiency of the home and the potential that somebody sees that it could invite somebody to come in, especially with the fact that it was vacant. So I called the agent and I was like, I'm just going to let you know, it looks like we've got ourselves a pretty big problem in terms of you might want to get somebody out here because there is some pretty significant water damage downstairs in the basement. I'm not sure how far it was, but it looks like it's been going for a while. And the response was, "Oh, I didn't even know that was happening. What did your clients think about the house?" Well, I mean, what do you say to that? Like, well, my clients were completely turned off by the house because at the end of it, they're not dealing with what kind of damage and how far is that going to go. Like, in essence, like it was completely disqualified. So I wasn't sure how many showings she had had through that, or if at the end of it, somebody walked in, didn't even walk down to the basement level, may have not noticed it, or the idea that there had been no showings over a certain amount of time, which then at that point means that nobody had been in the house. So, I think it's really important if you've got your house on the market, you're working with an agent, ask, and you're not in the area, or at the minimum, you're not, even if you're not able to get to the house over the course of a 7-day period, is your agent at that point doing those things for you? And the good agents will, and at that point, make sure that everything's good. Typically, I'm running mine either on a Wednesday or Thursday, running around to properties, just taking a look at them, especially if they're vacant. If somebody's occupied in them, for the most part, I'll check in. Then I'm not as concerned about it, just because of the fact that I would hope that they would see if there was an issue. But even still, occupied homes, going out and taking a look at them periodically, just to make sure that, I remember what we did when we staged. I know what we did when we did photos, but at the end of it, they're also living in the house. So are there things that need to be addressed? Like, is there a smell? Did something happen? Maybe they cook something in the house that at that point needs to be addressed. Sometimes you walk in, you don't notice it because you live in it, but yet at the end of it, buyers are smelling that. Are there any changes that need to be addressed in order to maximize on those showings? So, make sure, I would say that's one of the biggest things. This is a partnership, at least in our opinion, when we work with our clients. We are partnered with them. The idea that we want their property to stand out. We want to make sure that the property itself is taken care of, and that we're getting ahead of things without them having to let us know. We're ahead of those properties for our clients. I think I think they appreciate that. And I know that it definitely helps us when it comes down to getting homes under contract in this market where there's a lot of inventory. I would say it's not that super high, but it's high enough that you're competing with enough homes that the little differences make a big difference if at the end of it, you're trying to get buyers to bring that. And I would say water damage would be a significant impact on the possibility of buyers actually making offers, or at least at the very minimum making offers at the price point that seller's trying to sell. Not to mention the fact that what's the total cost of all of that damage? I have no idea. But hopefully this is helpful. If you have any questions, you're unclear, you want to know a little bit more about what we do and how we manage through our entire the journey of our list to sale, feel free, reach down in the comments. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions. But look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Have a great day.